Hi, my name's Tim Lloyd-Yates. I'm the advocate for the Bristol Older People's Partnership Board, and I'm here to report on the last meeting of that board, which took place at City Hall on the 24th of June 2014. I've got some meeting notes in front of me, so excuse me if I look down to refer to those. The first thing to say is that this is a very well attended board, always at least 20 attendees, which is a really good complement of people. Generally speaking, half the complement of the board is made up of older people and people from black and ethnic minorities, which again is an encouraging statistic, as is the relatively high proportion of people from the voluntary sector. So there were people there from Linkage, from Carers Support, from Alive, from the Alzheimer's Society, as well as the Council Commissioners. So a good board, a healthy board that's always well attended. The first item that was discussed was Kay Russell, the Strategic Planning Manager for Bristol City Council, and she was talking about the desire to make Bristol an age-friendly city. This is obviously a very big subject, and what they've done is they've looked to Manchester for some inspiration on this issue. Manchester is like a model age-friendly city, supposedly, and we all had a big discussion around that. Actually, one of the interesting things about this board is that some fairly big lumps of interesting work come across your desk, but we get relatively little amount of time to talk about it. So as you can imagine, an age-friendly city is an enormous subject with an enormous possible range of things for us to discuss. I was sitting next to Julie Boston, the new chair of the Bristol Older People's Forum, and her particular interests are public transport and public toilets, amongst many other things for older people. And it would have been nice if we'd have had the opportunity to discuss some of those very valid points in more detail. As it was, we looked at the Manchester model, and we kind of gave our agreements that we kind of move forward in that direction, and that there would be a further strategic update at the next meeting. So I look forward to being able to update you more in my next report on that in the future. The next presentation was a business presentation from Tony Jones, the Patient and Public Involvement Programme Manager for the Bristol Clinical Commissioning Group. And really, he was talking about how the CCG is going to be commissioning some fairly large pieces of work to go after their current piece of work, which is community mental health services. There were some, he opened the floor for questions, and there were some questions. Some of them were around how can we ensure that the valuable knowledge and innovations used by local voluntary sector and charity groups are given an opportunity to be included in these bids, because the bids tend to be really large, for really large pieces of work, and some of the smaller organisations in our cities, even some of the medium-sized ones, would find it far too onerous to be able to, or in fact wouldn't be taken seriously as the lead organisation for these bids. And Tony seemed to take those on board. It felt a little bit like he was the messenger there, here to tell us kind of what it was, what the programme of commissioning was up until this point, and that he would report back with answers to questions. So I think it would be an interesting piece of work to see the answers to those questions. Hopefully they'll be minuted and they'll come up in future meetings. The next piece of agenda was to talk about the Bristol Older People's Forum. Fantastic organisation in this city with now over 3,000 active members, which is extraordinary really in itself. And for the last few years, Judith Brown has been an amazing servant and chair of the forum. Judith's been a passionate advocate for everything to do with older people, especially the health and social care agenda. And she's decided that the time is right for her now to step down, and she's handed over chairmanship of that forum to Julie Boston, who's a passionate and knowledgeable campaigner and a very engaging speaker with a wide range of interests, mainly in volunteering and in how the community really needs to play an active role in shaping public services, stuff that's very close, I think, to all of our hearts. So great that the baton has been passed from one passionate advocate to another. Welcome, Julie. We then had a presentation from Claire Miller, CEO of Linkage, and Linkage was actually born from the Bristol Older People's Forum a good few years ago, and is now a very successful local independent charity operating out of the Create Centre, and with 8 or 9 staff doing amazing work, and being held up as a national model, especially in the Bristol Ageing Better bid, which has gone off to the National Lottery. Talking of that bid, we're just waiting to hear whether Bristol has got through to the final stages and will be awarded some money. Hopefully we'll get some news on that shortly. Mark Baker did a brief presentation on the Bristol Celebrating Age Festival, which is going to happen in September of this year. There's going to be events happening all over the city, and very nice that there's going to be an opening event at the M Shed with all kinds of interesting information. And if people are interested in joining the community organisations or the Bristol Older People's Forum, there'll be an opportunity to do so at that event. There was a very brief presentation from Kay Russell on Cities of Service, which is the opportunity to get some funding, I believe, from the lottery for specific pieces of work around older people in this instance. So we've submitted some ideas of things that might be good for us to look at. I submitted a piece on how we could better resource care home inspection, an inspection of day services in the city, an area that's currently a little bit underfunded in my opinion. And Kay's very kindly taken those on board and included those in her case for funding. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Geraldine Summers talked about the Care Act 2014, and there's going to be a working group on that, coordinated by Alistair Henderson, and there's going to be a working event on that quite shortly, and we've been asked to be kept informed of more detail on that. It's important that we understand all the ramifications of that particular act. And then Mike Hennessy talked about the Better Care partnership very briefly, and I understand that there are questions that we've tabled on that which will be interesting to see the answers on around hospital discharge and hospital admission. Hopefully we'll get some more detail on that in future. The next meeting is going to be on the 23rd of September 2014. That's my birthday. So I look forward to telling you all about that. Thank you very much. Speak again soon.